I want to get this phenomenon as I see it down on my piece of paper. I'm not interested in the stuffed hedgehog in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, like, what is it that you really have going on? And can I, through this process, notice something about my little friend here that I otherwise wouldn't have seen?
Hi, I'm Anna Mason. Welcome to this episode of Nature Studio TV, the place to be to grow your nature-inspired art skills and creativity. Have you ever struggled with drawing? It's a skill lots of us feel inadequate at. I've recently branched out into teaching drawing skills, and to do that, I've had to give the drawing process a lot of thought. There's a lot going on in our brains when we draw that's quite different to how we use them in regular everyday life. I recently had a fun and interesting conversation with nature journaling teacher John Muir Laws on this topic. John Muir Laws is a biologist, explorer and artist who has dedicated his career to sharing the benefits nature journaling can bring. It's a simple yet powerful practice of combining drawings and writing to describe and explore the nature you encounter. Both John and I are confident that drawing is a skill like any other that simply requires practice, and some instruction can really help. I hope you enjoy this slightly rambly chat that we had on the topic. Let's take a look.
It's really interesting, the fact that in nature journaling you're bringing in words, because some of the teaching that some of the strategies that I've employed to help people to really see what is in front of them is I've usually asked people to sort of try and step outside of the part of their brain that is handling language and words and judgments and making sense of things. I've tried to say to them, leave that aside, let's just focus on shapes of color and kind of go into that which we kind of understand to be a right brain mode, even though I know it's not as simple as left and right modes, but because I used to find that it would really block people potentially when they were learning, when they would almost have symbols or like labels in their mind of a strawberry should look like this, and they're kind of drawing some sort of construct that's in their mind rather than really seeing what's in front of them. And I used to ask people to do things like flip, because we'd usually be working from a photograph. So I'd be like, flip the photo round, flip round your picture and try and just start to see this as shapes of color. Because I'd be often asked, well, where's this leaf going? Is it going behind or is it going there? And I'm kind of like, I was trying to get them to create realistic works of art by just saying, you don't need to know. You just need to know it's this green shape and it goes here. So I feel like I was sort of doing almost the opposite of what you're trying to do, but it was almost to get them to a stage of being able to engage visually with what was there in front of them. And I think that's a really helpful stage that people often need to go through when they're learning to create pictures, to create realistically like what's in front of them, to observe and then to recreate it.
Yeah, I think that's, Anna, that is such an important part of learning to draw, because everybody, you even if you haven't drawn one before, you do have an idea in your head of what a strawberry looks like.
Yeah.
And so what people will tend to do is to draw that symbol. And if you watch kids learning to draw, there are so many books for kids on how to draw that the basic formula is draw this line, this line, this line, this line, and there's a boat.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So there's a sequence of steps, and then you're going to get a symbol that looks like a boat. It doesn't look like a boat. It looks like you can get a different symbol, but that's so totally different than there's a boat out there, and let's look at that boat, and how do I transfer what I see onto my paper? Yeah. And in that mental image of the boat really can get in your way.
That's right.
Because we start drawing the symbol, and then you take a drawing class, or you get one of these drawing books that says draw this line, this line, this line. You're like, oh wow, that's what you do is you end up drawing a more detailed symbol. Yeah. But it's still different than the boat out there. It's different than the strawberry that's in your hand. Mm. And so the techniques that you're talking about to kind of get us out of the symbol and into a direct encounter with the phenomenon that's in front of us. I think that those sorts of strategies, exactly the sorts of things that you're talking about, I think that those are the best practices in art. So, but then I would layer over that having some form of a scaffolding and understanding of the structure also really helps. So if you've ever been doing a botanical drawing and then partway through of it, you're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't attach to that. This inserts up in here, and that's why they're coming out at this angle. Oh, I wish I noticed that at the start of the drawing. Right? So understanding the structure, being able to look at the structure, and what are some of the ways, some strategies then to get that on your paper, I think are also useful. Or also just in part of the, if there's a leaf or a petal and it's twisting and it's curling, it's kind of doing some leaf yoga. Right? Here you're seeing the top surface, here you're seeing the underside of it. A number of these things can be really counterintuitive about how to draw them. So let's see if I can do this with the phone here. So let's say this is a leaf, and if it foreshortens this way, actually no, I want something with. Hold on a second. I'm going to tear up a piece of paper. Is this important information? Oh yes, it is. I just almost got to go into the recycling here. Oh, this will work. Let's say you're looking at the way that a leaf foreshortens. There's a whole bunch of aspects of that are just kind of really weird and counterintuitive, and it really helps to have somebody point that out to you, because the mental model that we have that's really wrong is often so powerful that it will overwrite what's the information that's coming in through your eyes. So here's our leaf, right? We kind of can get the idea, for instance, if it's foreshortened, that it just became shorter this way. This angle here becomes less acute, it becomes more obtuse. It's sharper when it's up here. But, things like when this then is tilted out to, say, a 45-degree angle out here, then the angle that will be on the angle that is pointing out this way is no longer a symmetrical shape. It has now the size, the length of one of these. If let's say I hold this way, this side over here has just become shorter than this side that is over here. And this angle right here, from the center line of this, the two sides of this, it's just become asymmetrical by my turning it at this different angle. Those sorts of things are counterintuitive. And our brain, because there's so much information, the amount of information that floods into our brain at every moment is more than we can handle. Yeah. More than our brains can process. So very quickly, what we do is we kind of go like, we'll kind of substitute symbols or kind of a simple heuristic for a complex structure that we see. So if you know some of those things, then it allows you, then you've got a fighting chance of kind of going like, oh, it's a leaf and it's at a 45-degree angle for me. I actually am going to look for sides of these things that are different sizes and proportions. So sometimes having pointers to some of these kind of odd aspects of perspective, those sorts of things help. But I absolutely agree that the idea that there's a way to draw a strawberry, and I'm going to give you a really detailed symbol of a strawberry that I now want you to copy is so different than getting somebody to look at that strawberry.
That's right. And, just going back to what you were describing, I think that touches on another difference between kind of how I've been having members of the community create using my tutorials, is that I focus on photographs. And I just think that for a learner, the things you were just describing, the photograph, because it just, renders 3D, 2D in a second, we almost don't have to worry about any of that. And I think it's a very useful tool for allowing that part of that brain to recede. And if I just paint what's there in front of me, it's going to look like that photo. Now, that photo might have a weird bent leaf that we can't really make out if that's the front or the back, but it looks like the photo. And that's kind of, what we've been aiming at in terms of getting people's skills up and getting people to just do this direct engagement. But I think where the nature journaling comes in and the way of working that you do comes in is I have a hunch that once people's skills are at a certain level, when it comes to observation and when it comes to mark making with pencils and brushes, then that's when, the deeper inquiry and kind of getting deeper into the subject and actually activating that part of the brain again and like doing both can be so powerful and so enjoyable.
I think that's true. If you think about when you're looking at something and you're drawing, if you're looking at the real object, you're looking at a three-dimensional object, and then light rays bounce off that object and they come into both of their eyes, and in each of your eyes they're processed individually as two-dimensional images. And so you're seeing the three-dimensional, and then you get these two. Through each lens, you're going to get a two-dimensional image over here and a two-dimensional over here. And then back in your visual cortex, these two bits of information, they cross over and they meld together, and your brain reconstructs. So you don't see in 3D. Your brain creates 3D out of the information that you're seeing. And so your brain is then stitching together these two-dimensional images, and it's taking the differences between them, and it's using that to calculate how close or far something is. So basically, if the two images are very close together, it says it's further away from you. If the images are really different, then your brain says, oh, that must be closer to you. So it's taking parts of the image and seeing, like, it's just comparing parts of the picture, figure out what's closer, what's further. That's crazy complex. Now you have a pencil in your hand, or a brush, and a flat piece of paper. You now are going to take the three-dimensional image that your brain has created, and you're going to try to reconstruct not a three-dimensional image, but a two-dimensional image of the three-dimensional image on the piece of paper. And then
every time you slightly move, it all slightly moves, and then every time, and then you changing your
That's right. So if each eye is getting a different picture of it. So if you just take your two fingers and you line those up so that you close one eye and you close one eye and line them up and then switch eyes, your fingers dance. And so you can go like, oh man, my two eyes, they're seeing totally different pictures. And then you can do this really interesting thing where you have one finger further away, right? Line them up and switch your eyes, right? Look at that dance. Get one finger closer to your head. Now look at that dance. Oh man, right? So your brain is doing all this complex processing, and then you're supposed to take this three-dimensional image and reconvert it back into a two-dimensional image. And then through using shadow and selective detail, make somebody think that they're again seeing a three-dimensional image on the piece of paper. So you're going from 3D to 2D to 3D to on your piece of paper 2D, and then you try to make that 2D thing on the piece of paper look 3D. So that's why
people say, I can't draw.
That's right.
I'm
So,
convinced.
and it's brilliant that you're starting with some photographs, because the 2D is like, okay, I've got a 2D thing,
Yeah.
and my brain's going to process that as a 2D thing. I'm then going to put it on the piece of paper as a 2D thing, and then maybe try to make that look a little bit more rounded.
And I think so. My strategy with some of the classes I'm creating is I'm actually teaching some freehand drawing, because I have previously been supplying sort of traceable drawings. So we've kind of bypassed the drawing stage altogether for the watercolor tuition. But I've started to teach some freehand drawing from photographs as a start, because then you can get into like learning some techniques around making, relative measurements and all this kind of landmarks and all this kind of stuff. But at least you're not having to contend with all the movement and everything. But I think it's a good starting point. And I think, it's definitely a skill set that you can be learned, can be taught, can be learned.
Right.
But it can be intimidating to just be dropped into this, start drawing what's in front of you if you're out in the field and things are moving. Like it's tough if you haven't done it.
That's why the scaffolding and structure is really useful. There's back in the day, there was a lot of drawing instruction that everybody, most people got. It was sort of considered a standard part of people's education that you would learn to do figurative drawing.
That's right.
And a lot of those techniques were taught. And then some years ago, this movement came about in art instruction that sort of everybody has their own sort of grandma Moses inner muse, and what you want to do is just kind of not taint that with any instruction and just let it express itself. And so the idea that you would teach some drawing skills was removed from curriculum.
That's right.
So I think you can err on the side of saying everybody draw my thing. But it's also, you can err on the side of not giving any structure and scaffolding. I think it really helps to have structure and scaffolding, and then you can choose to use that information or to not use that information.
That's right.
As you see fit. Just like if you teach somebody rules of grammar or maybe how to spell, it doesn't constrain them as a poet. They are then choosing when to step outside of a convention, but they know what the conventions are and when to use that as a deliberate tool.
It's a great analogy. And actually, I'm creating some classes where I'm really going to break down what is drawing, because it's actually such a huge topic. For example, my husband is a fantastic artist. He went through 3 years of like advanced training in, now I think it's called like technical drawing, but this is so learning how, sitting there with figures and learning how to draw the human body, for example, in all sorts of positions. So now he is somebody who can be asked to just draw me a picture of a man in a boat, and he will draw you something. It's all sketchy, but he's doing it with nothing to observe from, and he can create something from his imagination that looks really good. And that is something else as well. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I just want to explain, like, drawing is such a wide range, and like here what we're concerned with nature journaling and with the sorts of classes I've been teaching is about observation. And I think it does put it in the reach of more of us, or like, I still feel like I think I could do what Phil does, my husband does, if I had 3 years where I could like just focus on it.
It's a learnable skill, but it is different. So what you're doing there is you're trying to get your brain to have these sort of mental models and constructs to three-dimensionally visualize things. And you can draw that person in the boat from any angle, right? But that's different than there's that person in the boat with this light cast across them and the water, and these values, and how do we represent that little moment in time and space and light. For the stuff that I do, which is my big interest is nature journaling. I'm a scientist, and I am interested in just deep geeking out with all sorts of phenomena around me. And I use the drawing as a tool to help me kind of dig deeper and to geek out on things. And if there's a phenomenon in front of you, what our brain quickly does is we look at it, and then your brain, you'll label it.
Yes.
And so actually, first what you do is you assess, is it a threat to me? No. All right. So it's not going to eat me. I'm not going to eat it. I'll probably then label it. And once you've got it labeled, it's safe for my brain then to go on and focus on something else. But if I want to get myself,
about so much information around us all the time, right?
Yes, that's right. So there's more information than my brain can possibly process. And sort of evolutionarily, I'm set up to kind of do this quick assessment and then kind of move on to the next thing. It's practical, it's useful.
Yeah.
And it actually takes work to get yourself to observe deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So how can you get your brain to kind of go past this sort of superficial thing? It turns out that just staring at it doesn't work. Because if I stare at it, it just stares back, all right? And your brain very quickly gets into what's called a rumination loop, which means you'll notice a few kind of key details. And then as you continue staring at it, you'll notice those details again. And then you notice the details again. And then you notice those same details again. But you have the subjective experience of like staring at it and looking really hard at it. But really your brain has just kind of locked into this little pattern. I'm going to notice that. But there's some strategies that you can use to get yourself out of that. So drawing is one of them. So if I'm drawing this, right, if I drew the nose, now I'm over towards the ear. I'm forcing my brain to look in a different place. I can also do this verbally. So I can start to describe what I see here. And what I'll find is that if I say something about what I'm noticing, and then I say that same thing or start to say that same thing again, I'll be like, oh, I already got that. And so it's a great way of kind of getting yourself out of this rumination loop. So I'm essentially using, one of the major reasons that I'm using art and drawing, it's a tool for me to get out of my own kind of comfortable, efficient, but shallow way of observing the world.
Yeah.
And so in that, I'm typically not before a photograph. I'm actually before a three-dimensional phenomenon. So that's why I often am doing things like, how can I get myself to visualize this, think about it, create a basic scaffolding in my head to be able to get that down on the paper. And not the mental model of the man in the boat. I want to get this phenomenon as I see it down on my piece of paper. I'm not interested in the stuffed hedgehog in my mind. Yeah. I'm interested in like, what is it that you really have going on? And can I, through this process, notice something about my little friend here that I otherwise wouldn't have seen?
I hope this conversation inspires you to try drawing again. If you want to explore more about how closely observing and drawing nature can enrich your life, check out johnmuirlaws.com for a wealth of resources about nature journaling, and check out my site animasonart.com for classes on painting and drawing nature. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos helping you capture the beauty of nature on your paper. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.